Hi everyone, so let's take a look at the quantity theory of money. Right, when it comes to this theory, a number of students are often put off by the concept. They see it as mathematical, highly theoretical. I'm going to try and break that down and make it very, very straightforward for you to understand here, I hope. Okay, so let's take a look. So it simply indicates really that an increase in the money supply will lead to inflation. Okay, that's it. That's it in a nutshell. That an increase in the money supply will lead to an increase in the price level. That is what classical monetarist economists believe. Now let's take a look at this. This theory, the quantity theory of money, is based on the equation of exchange, and we can see I've drawn out the equation of exchange just here. MV equals PY. That is the money supply multiplied by the velocity of circulation. How many times currency actually passes through people's hands in the economies equals the price level multiplied by the real GDP. And that is the nominal GDP. Okay, that all sounds like a bit of a mouthful. So let's really break this down and really understand what's actually taking place here. So firstly, if we just imagine a very small scenario where we have perhaps 10 people in our system, our economic system, and amongst those 10 people they have £1. Okay, now that pound then circulates throughout that group of 10 people and passes based on the goods and services that are exchanged for that pound coin. Okay, it actually passes through everyone's hands in that group once. Okay, so everyone touches that coin and passes it on. Okay, so the velocity of circulation there, because that has been moved through the economy 10 times, then we can see £1 times 10, well, that would equal a nominal GDP of £10. So the actual nominal GDP for the economy there would be £10. Now, this is really showing what is bought in the economy. This side of the equation is showing what is bought, and this side of the equation is showing what is sold. So if we have £1 being exchanged 10 times, then we can see the price level in the economy is going to be £1, and the level of economic output, the goods and services actually produced in the economy, which Y helps us to understand here, is of course 10. So therefore we can see that 1 times 10 equals 1 times 10. Okay, so hopefully that really simplifies what looks like quite a complex theory here. Okay, so that should break it down quite nicely for you. Here we have what is actually bought. Here we have what is sold, how much it's sold for, and what the actual level of output was, which is denoted by Y, our real GDP level. So that gives us our nominal GDP. Now, on this side of the equation, what's useful to actually think about perhaps is that M, the money supply, the supply of money in the economy, represents the gear that is set for a bicycle perhaps. Okay, if you just imagine this analogy. So we have the money supply representing the gear, and you can be in high gear, which of course would be an increasing money supply, or you could be in a low gear where you have perhaps no increase in the money supply or just marginal increases in the money supply. Now, meanwhile, we have the velocity there, and the velocity would represent the person on the bike and whether they are applying the brakes or not. Okay, so this is useful in terms of understanding what is likely to take place with firms and households, and whether they want to actually hold on to cash and i.e. apply the brake, or whether they actually want to go and buy goods and services, carry out investment and so on. Okay, so if that's the case, well, they won't be applying the brake at all. So that may well be a nice useful analogy in terms of actually understanding what is really taking place. So if you think about when consumer confidence is low during a slump, then of course the velocity of circulation is of course likely to be very, very low. During a boom time when consumer confidence is very high, then the velocity of circulation is likely to be higher. Okay, however, to understand this as the quantity theory of money, we must apply two crucial assumptions. Okay, so when monetarists look at this equation, they actually want to apply these two assumptions. So let's take a look. So firstly, they argue that the velocity of money is not influenced by the money supply itself, but actually it is set in stone by things like the regularity and the frequency with which pay dates actually occur and take place. Okay, so therefore they argue that that is actually fixed. So they argue that V is actually fixed, and firms, households, consumers, they have no actual ability to change that very quickly. That's what they believe. Okay, meanwhile, we see that real GDP is not influenced by the money supply. After all, we know when it comes to why the classical monetarist economists believe in the long-run aggregate supply curve being completely inelastic. So that is, in the long run, we always restore back to a position of full employment where everyone who wants to find a job in the economy can find a job. Okay, so therefore we can also denote that that is fixed as well. Okay, so if we just rearrange this equation and we just consider what P would actually equal here, well, P would equal, on the other side of the equation, MV, which is fixed, divided by Y, which is also fixed. Okay, so just coming back to the very, very simple numerical example that I've applied, very crude, but it does the job, I think, here. We can see that if we actually apply this, well, we can see that P equals the money supply, which is 1, multiplied by the velocity, which is 10, divided by the nominal level of GDP, or sorry, Y, which is the real GDP, which is 10. So therefore we would reach an outcome where P equals 1. But what's crucial is that price essentially equals the money supply here. Okay, because you're dividing V and Y there. Okay, so very, very interesting. But let's just apply it to what we see in this long-run aggregate supply model. Let's just add in our aggregate demand and a short-run aggregate supply curve and consider what would happen if the money supply is actually increased. So we've got P1. If the money supply actually increases, then people's demand for money, demand for holding money, is also likely, of course, to increase, and firms are likely to respond by producing more goods and services. Well, what can we see here? We can see that the economy would move from point A through to point B. Okay, now workers would be initially happy to actually produce and work longer hours because they perhaps believe they're getting higher real wages. But actually, these wage increases they're getting are nominal. They're just nominal increases. And as they start to realise that actually their wages aren't keeping up with the price level, then they will demand higher wages. As they demand higher wages, the short-run aggregate supply curve would shift back to the left-hand side, and the economy would then transition up and back onto the long-run aggregate supply curve to point C there. Okay, and we can see that we are restored at a higher price level because in addition to those higher prices, we also have workers who are really demanding higher pay rates because of their adapted expectations there. Okay, so it's with this in mind that we must understand Milton Friedman's very, very famous quote regarding inflation, and that is, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. So if there is an increase in M, there will be an increase in P, and we can see that on our diagram right here. Okay, so there we go. That's what the monetarist argument is regarding the quantity theory of money. But of course, these assumptions are well, they're very crude. They really are. To assume that there's no influence on the money supply. There's no influence on the level of velocity of money. Well, that comes down largely, to, of course, to consumer and business confidence in the economy, and whether they actually want to hoard cash or whether they want to spend it. Okay, so that's a crucial point to bear in mind. Okay, and then we've also got a situation where real GDP not influenced by the money supply. Okay, so both of these, of course, are highly contested by Keynesian economists. If you imagine a scenario perhaps where quantitative easing is undertaken, much like we see in Japan, or have seen in Japan in recent years, where the money supply has been greatly increased, but the price levels haven't increased, well, we see a classic liquidity trap in action there. That liquidity trap means that actually that the price level has been unresponsive to the change in the money supply. Okay, so it's not always the case that increase in the money supply will always increase the price level, but nevertheless it gives you an interesting argument when it comes to that velocity of circulation that's taking place, how quickly money is circulating, and how damaging potentially quantitative easing could be on the price level. Okay guys, we'll leave that there. Thanks ever so much for watching.